Ladies, we are caffeinated today. Hello, welcome back to the Cozy Moth Reads YouTube video series. Yeah, it doesn't roll off the tongue as nicely as the Cozy Moth Knits. Maybe it only sounds good in my ears because I've said it so many times. But anyway, yep, here I am back again with another book review. I didn't do one back in June-ish, because life was a little bit crazy. But I have combined the books that I've read in May and in June into this video. So a little like end of spring, beginning of summer book review situation. I was actually in May and June, I was practically living by myself because my husband was away working in Arizona. We live in Delaware, by the way. So he was gone for about a month, a couple weeks longer than what they expected, what they told him that he was going to be there for. So it was a little bit hectic around the household. Yeah, so I had a lot of things to catch up on. Hence why I didn't do like a whole lot of reading. So yeah, and then anyway, but anyway, we're here. So I guess we'll get started with this review. Two things I want to mention before we get into the book review. I actually did not finish. I DNF'd two books. The first one is 1,000 Ships. I got about 100 pages into this and I couldn't tell you what was happening. I just couldn't get into it. I'm not sure what it was about this one because it was a Greek mythology retelling, which, as if you've been watching this series for some time, you know that I've fallen in love with Greek mythology retellings. So I was expected to like this one, but it just wasn't. It didn't hook me in like a lot of the other books have done in the past. I'll give it another try later this year, I think, but just at this time it just wasn't doing it for me, so I DNF'd that. Second was The Music Shop, which I don't remember the name of the author, but I'll put a picture right here, or right here, whichever side it is. I had seen this book all over bookstores and it really looked appealing to me, my kind of thing. You know, like, I'm a music fan, especially like classic rock music, and I collect vinyl records. So that always looked interesting to me, but after getting 50 pages into it, again, it just wasn't hitting right. It just wasn't for me. So I just couldn't get into it, so I DNF'd that as well. Maybe I'll try it again, but like it seemed, I don't know, there was just something about it that like you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of like a Lifetime movie or a Hallmark movie, the first 50 pages in, and it seemed really corny and I just wasn't, that's just not the type of thing I'm into. So I just DNF'd that. Who knows, maybe life will change and I'll pick it up again another time. So yeah, so those are the two DNFs I brought to your attention, and I read 5 books over the past 2 months, which is a bit different or a bit underwhelming compared to the past couple months. I've been reading a lot, but yeah, like I said, life's just been crazy. So it was a light reading couple months. So let's just get started with the review. Alright, so the first book that I'm going to talk about today is My Year of Rest and Relaxation by OTTESS MOSHFEGH. OTTESS MOSHFEGH. Yes, OTTESS MOSHFEGH. A lot of booktubers have read this book and have talked about it, which is why I picked it up. I read a lot of mixed reviews on this one. Some people either loved it or they thought it was pretentious and weird, but I'm the type of person who likes to form my own opinions. Like, I'd rather consume the content myself and then form an opinion as opposed to, you know, I don't know, like I just like to form my own opinions and like try not to let other people's opinions affect mine. So I just decided to give this one a go. I saw it was available at the library that I work at, which is kind of surprising to me. So I picked it up for myself. So let me tell you all about it. As always, if you see me looking over here, it's because I have my notes. because I'd rather not go into these type of videos unprepared, not so much stream of consciousness. Like, I like to have all my notes on paper / a screen, yeah, when I talk about literature. So let me read the little summary I kind of put together for this one. In this slice of life novel, we follow our narrator who lives in an apartment in New York City at the very beginning of the turn of the millennia. So 2019, like around the 2000s, very early 2000s, like 99 to 2002 kind of situation. She has recently lost both of her parents and her job in the span of only a couple months, and encompassed by grief and the drive to just give up, she embarks on a year of rest, which is very interesting, but she's able to do so because she is a trust fund baby, so she can just quit her job and continue to live in New York City for, you know, whatever, without working. Only leaving her apartment to grab snacks from the bodega and occasionally visit her eccentric therapist, she goes all in on this concept of rest and relaxation, much to her friends' disapproval. When our narrator is not in a drug-induced sleep, she watches VHS tapes and sometimes ventures out into the world. The novel ends with her coming out of her year of rest on a very important day in this country's history. And without giving any spoilers, you might know in what direction I'm going with that. This is one of those books where nothing happens and yet everything happens. It gives, with New York, it's a book about nothing, in vein of Seinfeld. It's a book about nothing, but yet stuff's happening all the time. I've heard a lot of people say that this book is a great representation of depression, which I feel like is pretty hyperbolic, pretty exaggerated to say. It sounds like a description of depression from someone who's never had depression. What I like about OTTESS MOSHFEGH's writing is that she does not stray away from the unpleasantries that come with everyday life. Some of the stuff in here is kind of gross, but I guess that's kind of like, it like really puts you in the mindset of our protagonist, our narrator. It's unsettling at some points, which I guess adds to the experience of the novel. I did find the narrator to be unlikable, and I think that is a consensus across the board, and that's the point, I think, is, she's a very unlikable person. Like I said earlier, she's a trust fund baby. She, she has unlimited wealth that she can just use to automatically pay her bills and just, waste her money on snacks at the bodega and just watch, Whoopi Goldberg movies whenever she's awake. And we see that kind of frustration in her friend, because her friend likes to come over and treat her as if like she's some sort of project, and which I don't like the friend either, because the friend, but like, yeah, everyone in this book is not likable. There's no likable characters in this book, but it's so real, because like nothing's happy-go-lucky in this book at all. Like there's no redeeming qualities to it, but that is kind of real life. Not everything is sunshine and rainbows all the time. Like sometimes it's gruesome and gross and unpleasant, and I think that is the direction that MOSHFEGH took in writing this novel. Overall, I found the novel to be very fascinating, and I look forward to reading more of OTTESS MOSHFEGH's work. And I will read you a quick little quote, which I feel like summarizes the entirety of this book. Sleep felt very productive. Something was getting sorted out. I knew in my heart, that was perhaps the only thing in my heart back then, that when I'd sleep enough, I'd be okay. I'd be renewed, reborn. I would be a whole new person. Every one of my cells rearranged enough times that the old cells were just distant, foggy memories. My past life would be but a dream, and I could start over without regrets, bolstered by the bliss and serenity that would have accumulated in my year of rest and relaxation. I give my year of rest and relaxation 3.5 stars. The next book that I read in May was Klara and the Sun by KAZUO ISHIGURO, And I have read one of Ishiguro's books before in the past, several years ago, and that was Never Let Me Go, because I really wanted to see the movie, and I figured I would read the book first, and I found the book very interesting. I highly recommend Never Let Me Go. It is sci-fi, but like it's not like in-your-face sci-fi. Like it's very interesting, very nice twist in it. Highly recommend. Just like I recommend Klara and the Sun. Klara and the Sun is about Klara, an artificial friend who has been assigned to a teenage girl that has a fatal disease. Klara is essentially an AI robot who is very much in tune with the emotions of humans and is learning every second she is around humans to become more human-like. When the health of the child that she is assigned to takes a turn, Klara is given a proposition by the parents of the child, which changes her assignment entirely. Both Klara and the reader are presented with ethical dilemmas that do not have a clear-cut right or wrong answer, which makes the reading experience very much more dark and suspenseful. I read the majority of this book on a mini vacation I took with Phil at the end of May, and I'm glad I was able to spend as much time with this book as I did, because this really deserves to be read in very large chunks as opposed to just a little bit at a time. There is so much happening and so much that that's important to pay attention to. It's really worth maybe not reading all at once, though I'm sure you can. It is quite an emotional story. The writing is absolutely beautiful. You really feel for Klara, and you get to see her become more human-like and become and adapt to living with humans as an AI robot, and it's very, very fascinating to see her pick up human characteristics and human emotions and express them herself. And the ethical question in the middle of this novel is comes out of left field, and it's very, very interesting, and I just found it really compelling to read, and it really, it makes you think about the future of AI technology and what that's going to look like in the next several years, because technology is always moving so fast, and I wonder if we'll also be presented with that question. And I highly recommend you reading this book if you don't have a problem with existentialism, because you're definitely going to have moments where you're questioning your life as you're questioning human existence, and yeah, it's just one of those that really hooks you in and really worth the time to read. Quote from Klara and the Sun is, "Until recently, I didn't think that humans could choose loneliness, that there was sometimes forces more powerful than the wish to avoid loneliness." I give Klara and the Sun 3.5 stars. The next book I picked up for the transition from May into June is a book that I picked up in a bookstore in Ithaca, New York, called Buffalo Street Books. Highly recommend going there. Cutest little bookshop. I really like that one, and OTTESS Books, which is about a couple blocks away. OTTESS was very, very cozy. Again, highly recommend that shop. The book that I read in the May to June transition was Elektra by Jennifer Saint. I was a little disappointed that the first book that I tried to read in May ended up being a DNF, and it was a Greek mythology retelling. So I had high hopes for this one to keep me engaged, so that I didn't, lose my love for the Greek mythology retelling. And it did not disappoint, I've got to say. This is Jennifer Saint's second Greek mythology retelling, the first being Ariadne, which I read in May? No, I read in April. But yeah, she just published this year, and so I was so excited to pick this up and read it myself. I really enjoyed Ariadne, not as much as any of Madeline Miller's. I really enjoy Ariadne, so I was excited to read Elektra. Instead of focusing on one woman from Greek mythology, we were focusing on 3. Very exciting. So let me give you a tiny little summary into this one. I have it written in front of me. Elektra follows the stories of 3 women who have been affected by the Trojan War. We have, and give me a second with this one, Clytemnestra, maybe Clytemnestra. Let's see.
Clytemnestra.
I was right. Okay, so yay! All right. So we have Clytemnestra, the wife of Agamemnon, and sister of Helen, basically the woman who spurs the Trojan War. We have Elektra, the youngest and most loyal daughter of Agamemnon, and Cassandra, a princess of Troy and priestess of Apollo, who has been gifted the power of foresight. It is very rare to find female-centric observations in Greek mythology epics. So reading about the Trojan War and how it affected these women in particular is very interesting. So yeah, a lot of us are familiar, if you only have like the basic understanding of Greek mythology, a lot of us are familiar with the Trojan War and what kind of spurred it on. I'm sure many of us have seen Troy, pretty much that. And if you've read, you know, where is it? Yes, Song of Achilles. It delves into the Trojan War some. So yeah, it was very interesting to bounce back and forth between the three perspectives, two of them being kind of on one side of the Trojan War and one being on the other. I found Clytemnestra's story to be the most compelling. Just, you know, seeing her fall in love with Agamemnon and then fall out of love following the brutal death of her daughter at her husband's hand. And that isn't really spoilers because, as I've mentioned in the past, this epic is thousands of years old, so you can find it anywhere. Yeah, I found it to be the most compelling, how she reacted and how she joined forces with Agamemnon's estranged son. And then I found Elektra, Clytemnestra's daughter, to be entirely insufferable, which is such a shame because she's, you know, the namesake of this book. I found her to be the most unlikable character in here. I just hated the fact that she just blindly took her father's side because my father's the king or whatever, and it's, you know, without listening to her mother, and I don't know, I just found her to be, like I said, completely insufferable, and I was not upset when she went away, basically. Yeah, I just found her to be completely annoying, and I found myself not so engaged on her perspective of the story. And then Cassandra, I honestly could have taken her story or left it. I thought it was interesting to see her side of things, you know, being she was close with Helen of Troy as her brother took Helen to be his wife, and just seeing her interact with Helen and, you know, growing to like her, not so much like her, but understand her power, and to see her dedication to Apollo. And it was kind of sad to, you know, she has this gift of foresight from Apollo, and of course no one believes her, so she's trying to tell everyone of the future. No one's listening, yada, yada, yada. But yeah, I honestly could have done, like I said earlier, I could have done without Elektra's side. It was interesting to see her try to foil her mother. But I just found her so insufferable. I did not find her likable at all, which is different from, like, you know, a book where this character is completely unlikable, but yet you kind of relate to them on a certain level, not entirely, but, like, you know, that feels real. But this one, it just felt forced. It just felt like shoved in there. Elektra being just like the most insufferable character you'd ever come across. And that's not, you know, Jennifer Saint's fault. Like, she clearly made that choice. Maybe some people liked Elektra, but I definitely was on the side of Clytemnestra 100%. Or maybe not 100% because she did some unethical things. But I was team Clytemnestra for the majority of this book. I do enjoy Jennifer Saint's writing style. I mentioned that when I read Ariadne. I'm interested to see what Greek myth she tackles next. Same with, you know, Madeline Miller. I really hope that she continues to write these Greek mythology retellings. I think she does a pretty good job at it. All right, a little closing quote for you guys. Nothing brought them more joy than the fall of a lovely woman. They picked over her reputation like vultures, scavenging for every scrap of flesh they can devour. I give Elektra by Jennifer Saint 4 stars. All right, after a month of some pretty heavy works of fiction, I decided to pivot to something a little bit more lighthearted, and that is David Sedaris' new collection of essays, Happy Go Lucky. I have been a David Sedaris stan for many, many years. I saw him live in Wilmington a few years ago. I stood in line, I got to meet him, he signed my book. I'll have to show you what he wrote, because it kind of like made my day. Okay, I had him sign my copy of Let's Explore Diabetes with Owls, which I highly recommend. I recommend any of his stuff, but this one is my favorite. He wrote, "To Caitlin, you make me want to live again." And he writes this in many people's copies of the book, but you know, he signed it and everything. Like, highly recommended David Sedaris book reading. It's always enjoyable, and you have to wait in line to meet him. Such a very interesting man. Anyway, I'm always blown away with every title that David Sedaris publishes. I love his perspective on things. Just very, you know, eccentric voice in the world right now. I always pre-order every book that he publishes. So I was really excited to read this one because the past 2 books he produced. I read last year his second half of his diaries, which was fine. It's not like this. It's definitely more raw. And then he produced a collection of like his best of stuff that was published. A lot were published in collections of fiction, and then also the New Yorker, because he writes a lot for the New Yorker magazine. But so I was excited for something fresh, something new, and I was pleasantly surprised. Let me read a little bit of what I wrote. Despite what the title of the book insinuates, the collection of essays is not as humorous as his past publications. Written during the pandemic, Sedaris takes time to reflect on society, politics, social justice, and his own flaws as an older man and as someone who is part of the LGBT community. We see Sedaris consider his own worldview during times like these and how he fits in both as an ally and as a representation. We also see Sedaris become a little more bitter and cynical in his observations. His jaunty yet honest personality that has shown through in a lot of his previous works is replaced with a brutally honest curmudgeon who is becoming sick of his father, his siblings, and his partner Hugh, who are all beloved by fans of his work. Though it was a bit jarring to see a shift in Sedaris' tone, it is also a natural progression, I feel. I think during and following the pandemic, along with continuing reminders of social injustices, shootings, police brutality, hate crimes against Black, Asian, and Jewish groups, frustrating presidencies, wealth inequality, and the dismantling of Roe v. Wade, etc., our zeal and excitement and hope for life has become clouded as we have become cynical like Sedaris. The irony of the happy-go-lucky title shines through, which in classic Sedaris fashion is absolutely genius. I don't know where this, established book critic language came from, but I think it was because I was listening to jazz as I was writing this. I felt very educated and very scholarly when, observing this title. So yes, it's very different from a lot of his previous works, though of course it is still humorous. I dog-eared some, quotable moments. But yeah, there's a tone shift. And if you read reviews on this book, you see a lot of fans kind of being disappointed in the shift in tone. But I found it to be natural and, relatable. I think like I mentioned earlier, with where we are in the world right now, I think a lot of us have become very cynical, myself included, and to see someone like David Sedaris, who, like I said, has always been eccentric and witty and, you know, always finds humor in something, to suddenly become, like I mentioned earlier, a curmudgeon in the world that we live in right now. I just feel like that's a natural progression for anyone. So yeah, I found this book to be very interesting and very much enjoyable, like any other of his collection of essays. I'm going to read you a couple snippets from this book because I just really enjoy his writing style, and like a couple things I'm going to you know, mention are a bit more serious. Some are a little bit more humorous, but I just can't pick one, so I'm just going to share a couple of them with you. A speech to graduates. I hear things from parents all the time when I meet them at a book signing. Our daughter is an aspiring writer, and we told her that that's fine, but she needs something to fall back on. Is she a terrible writer, I ask? Well, no. Is she lazy? Has she shown no improvement since she started? Of course not, the parents say. She's wonderful. Writing is all she cares about. Then why does she need to fall back, I ask? Are you saying that you have no faith in her before she's even had a chance to prove herself? It's an unfair question on my part, as it makes the parents sound unsupportive. What they mean is that they don't want their child to be broke and suffer rejection. But there are plenty of worse things. This is a little snippet from hurricane season. Florence, it was said, gave new meaning to the word namaste along the North Carolina coast. Are you going to evacuate? Namaste. Right, this one is from The Vacuum. The lockdown was brutal for people with Fitbits, especially those who lived under curfews. I had a perfect record stepwise and was not about to break it for a raging pandemic. Last one is from the titular Happy-Go-Lucky. Neither Amy, his sister, Amy Sedaris, nor I care about the news anymore, at least the political news. I'm vaguely aware that Andrew Cuomo has fallen out of favor, and that people who aren't me will be receiving government checks for some reason or another. But that's about it. When Trump was president, I started every morning by reading the New York Times, followed by the Washington Post, and would track both papers' websites regularly throughout the day. To be less than vigilant was to fall behind. And was there anything worse than not knowing what Stephen Miller just said about Wisconsin? My friend Mike likened this constant monitoring to having a second job. It was exhausting, and the moment that Biden was sworn into office, I let it all go. When the new president speaks, I feel the same way I do on a plane when the pilot announces that after reaching our cruising altitude that he will head due north, or take a left at Lake Erie. You don't need to tell me about your job, I always think. Just, you know, do it. I give Happy-Go-Lucky by David Sedaris 4 stars. Alright, the final book that I'm going to talk about today is Slouching Towards Bethlehem by JOAN DIDION. After reading Play It As It Lays back in March, I was very anxious to read anything else by JOAN DIDION, so I chose her literary classic, Slouching Towards Bethlehem. I also purchased this book while in Ithaca, New York at OTTESS Books. It took me a little bit longer to read this one, not because I didn't find it enjoyable, but because, like I've mentioned a couple times throughout this video, life has been a little crazy, so I haven't spent as much time dedicated to reading, but I did find this one enjoyable nonetheless. So I figured I would just read the little summary, a little blurb on the back of this book to kind of summarize what this is all about. It is a collection of essays like Happy-Go-Lucky, but it is a little different. Slouching Towards Bethlehem is an essential portrait of America, and California in particular, during the 60s. The remarkable debut essay collection by one of the most distinctive prose stylists in our area, it explores such subjects as John Wayne and Howard Hughes, growing up in California, the nature of good and evil in a Death Valley motel room, and San Francisco's Haight-Ashbury, the heart of counterculture. In her portraits of people, Didion is not out to expose, but to understand. She makes them neither villainous nor glamorous, but alive and botched, and often mournfully beautiful. How can you not? How could you not pick this one up? So interesting, so beautifully written. I particularly love the titular essay, Slouching Towards Bethlehem, as it It's a portrait of those involved in the counterculture movement in Haight-Ashbury during the 60s. And as I've mentioned on this series before, I find that era in that particular area of the country very fascinating, and I will devour any sort of content regarding that. So of course I did find that to be very interesting. It was very raw and very real and very tragic in a way. And I found her representation of these hippies, as we call them. Like I said, I liked how it gives us a fascinating look into the lives of people who are both sensationalized and demonized by popular media. And so it was nice to see something both raw and refined in her writing about these particular people. So I'm going to read a quick little quote for you. This is from the titular essay, Slouching Towards Bethlehem. Steve is troubled by a lot of things. He is 23, was raised in Virginia, and has an idea that California is the beginning of the end. I feel it's insane, he says, and his voice drops. This chick tells me that there's no meaning to life, but it doesn't matter. We'll all just flow right out. There have been times that I feel like packing up and taking off to the East Coast again. At least there I'd had a target. At least there you'd expect that something's going to happen. He lights a cigarette for me and his hands shake. Here you know it's not going to. I asked what it is that's supposed to happen. I don't know, he says. Something. Anything. I give Slouching Towards Bethlehem 3 stars. I only give it 3 stars because I read it in such small chunks. I think if I was able to dedicate more time to it and to read larger chunks of it at a time, I would have liked it more. But I wasn't interested just yet in rereading this just to get a better understanding. I'll definitely pick it up again. Again, highly recommend if you can handle some of the realness of talking about things like drugs and addiction and, you know, some unpleasantries. But yeah, again, 3 stars. So that is it for what I read in May and June. I really enjoyed all the books, like thoroughly. I found them all to be so fascinating and interesting, and I've really been enjoying some of the books that I've been picking as of late. Yeah, I've only had to DNF 3 books this year out of, you know, the first 7 months out of the year. But yeah, I think it's been pretty good. So thank you so much for tuning in to this another installment of the Cozy Moth Reads. I promise you, coming up in the near future, I will be posting another knitting vlog. Believe it or not, I have picked up knitting again full force, and I am excited to show you what I've made come the end of July / beginning of August. That way I can build up a little bit of something before I show you. You know, that way I can it's worth filming, you know. Right now I only have like 1 finished object, but I'm working on a couple things and I'm excited to show you guys. So stay tuned for that. And with that being said, I'm gonna leave it here. So I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, rest of your week, rest of your month, whenever I see you again, between now and whenever I see you again. I hope that you guys are reading as well. Let me know in the comments below what you've been reading, and because I would love to hear about it, and I also would love some book recommendations, though Phil did get me 11 books for my birthday, which maybe I'll show you in another video. But yeah, so I'm just gonna leave it right here. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button if you're interested in seeing what I have to put out in the next, you know, in the future. And also follow me on Instagram at the Cozy Moth Knits. So stay safe, everyone. Keep doing what makes you happy, whether that's knitting, reading, whatever. And I will see you all later.